Resilience isn't about being impenetrable. It's about moving through pressure with grace. We tend to admire people who seem unshakable. The executive who remains composed when everything's falling apart. The entrepreneur who keeps going despite setback after setback. The woman who manages the career, the family, the relationships, the responsibilities, and somehow never seems to be overwhelmed by it all. We call them resilient, but somewhere along the way, we've confused resilience with armor. We start believing that being strong meant pressure shouldn't affect us, that resilient people don't get overwhelmed or discouraged or disappointed or frustrated or afraid. They just keep going. But that isn't necessarily resilience. Sometimes it's survival dressed up as strength. Most of us learn how to handle pressure long before we consciously decide how we want to handle it. Maybe you learned that capable people don't ask for help. Maybe that being successful meant never letting anybody see you struggle. Perhaps you became the dependable one, the person who everybody could count on, and eventually stopped noticing how much you were carrying. Or maybe achievement became the way you proved that you were worthy, competent, or simply enough. Well, these patterns can serve us incredibly well until one day they don't. What once helped us succeed can eventually become an emotional hand-me-down that we've outgrown. The belief that I have to handle everything myself, the pressure to never let anybody down, the expectation that I should be able to do more, the fear that if I slow down, everything is going to fall apart, or that assumption that strong people just don't struggle. You wear those beliefs long enough, they begin to feel like part of your identity. But they aren't who you are. They're simply strategies that you've learned to wear. Pressure isn't necessarily the problem. Some pressure stretches us. It challenges us to think differently, become more resourceful, develop more skills or capabilities that we didn't even know we had. The problem begins when resilience means becoming unaffected by it, because human beings aren't designed to be impenetrable. We feel, we react, we get disappointed, we get tired, we question ourselves, and we need rest. We need to recover. Emotional intelligence isn't about eliminating those responses. It's about recognizing them, understanding what they're trying to tell us, and then choosing what happens next. That's where resilience actually lives. Resilience isn't refusing to bend, it's knowing how to bend without losing yourself. And there's a difference between armor and resilience. Armor will tell you, don't let them see you struggle. But resilience says, I can acknowledge this is difficult without believing that I'm not capable of it. Armor says, just push through. But resilience asks, what do I need to move through this well? Armor says, I should be able to handle everything. But resilience says, strength includes knowing when something's just got to change. Armor will tell you that failure is evidence that you're not good enough. But resilience says that failure is just information. You see, armor tries to prevent you from feeling vulnerable. Resilience teaches you that vulnerability is survivable. And that distinction matters because armor is heavy. And eventually, carrying it just becomes yet another source of pressure. And high achievers, oh, they are particularly good at turning emotional patterns into socially rewarding behaviors because perfectionism can look like excellence. People pleasing can look like exceptional leadership. Chronic busyness can look like ambition. Hyper independence can look like competence. Emotional avoidance can look like composure. And exhaustion, well, that can look like commitment. You see, the outside world may reward the behavior, but never see what it costs the person who's wearing it. And that's why success alone isn't always a reliable measure of well-being, because you can still be highly successful and be wearing emotional strategies that don't fit the person that you've become. In fact, sometimes the very strategies that helped you reach one level are the same strategies preventing you from enjoying it or from moving on to the next one. Grace under pressure doesn't mean maintaining a perfect smile when everything's burning around you. It's staying connected to yourself while circumstances are demanding something from you. It means creating enough space between what happens and how you respond to decide how you want to be in that very moment. Sometimes grace looks like persistence. Sometimes it looks like changing direction. Sometimes it means saying no or asking for help. And sometimes it just means admitting this isn't working anymore. And sometimes the most resilient thing you can do is just stop pushing. Because true resilience gives you options. And that's important because when you're operating from an old emotional pattern, you often feel as though you don't have any options. You think, I have to do this. I can't disappoint them. I got to get it right. I need to keep going. I should be able to handle this. Listen closely to the language you use when you're under pressure. Words like have to or should or must or can't, always are often clues that something in your emotional wardrobe needs attention. Becoming more resilient doesn't require becoming tougher. It requires becoming more aware. So the next time you feel pressure building, instead of immediately asking, how am I going to get through this? Try asking, what am I wearing right now? Is it perfectionism? Is it fear of judgment? The need to prove myself? People pleasing? The belief that everything depends on me? And then ask, does this question still fit? Does it feel good when I wear it? Because that question creates something incredibly valuable. It creates choice. Oh, you still might have to deal with the deadline or the difficult conversation, the setback, or the enormous responsibility sitting in front of you. But you don't have to carry every old emotional pattern into that situation with you. You can tailor your response to what the situation actually requires. You can edit the beliefs that are adding unnecessary weight, and you can restyle how you move through the experience. Resilience should be flexible. I mean, think about the clothes that move with you. You know, the ones that feel most comfortable. They give and they breathe and they allow you to sit and walk and bend and stretch and change direction. Well, emotional resilience works pretty much the same way. Rigidity might look strong, but flexibility is what allows you to adapt. Resilient people aren't people who never get knocked off balance. They're simply people who know how to find their balance again. They know that one difficult moment doesn't define them, and they understand that discomfort doesn't automatically mean danger. They can experience uncertainty without needing to control everything. They recognize when an old strategy isn't serving them. And perhaps most importantly, they know that recovery is part of resilience, not evidence that resilience has failed. Because you don't need heavier armor. If life feels increasingly demanding, your instinct may be to become more tough, to work harder, to care less, to push through, expect more from yourself, build another layer of armor. But maybe the next version of you doesn't need heavier armor. Maybe you need fewer layers, you know, less perfectionism, less proving, less responsibility for everybody else's emotions, less guilt about resting, less fear about disappointing people, less attachment to the idea that strength means doing everything alone. Because resilience isn't measured by how much pressure you can absorb before you finally break. It's reflected in how well you know yourself while you're experiencing it, how quickly you recognize what you need, and how intentionally you respond, how willing you are to adapt, how confidently you can release the emotional strategies that no longer fit. You don't have to become impenetrable to become resilient. You simply need to learn how to move through pressure without losing yourself in the process. That's the art of wearing pressure well. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is recognize when it's time to change what you're wearing. I'm Roberta Fernandez, your mind stylist.